Hello everyone, thank you for joining me today. I've been inspired by nature and my adventuring outside to come back into the studio and paint a couple sunsets. I was just so happy to be able to get out and enjoy the beautiful weather and the sunset. Ever since then, all I can do is think about painting. I'm glad that you're here. Hopefully you can paint with me. If not, that's all right too. We're going to be focusing on painting a sunset, a landscape. I was lucky enough to have some wonderful weather, and we went out to the river and were able to have just a lovely time on the water. We captured some beautiful photographs. I really like to paint outside and draw outside. One of the things about plein air painting is it really depends on the light, and at sunset light changes quite a bit and it goes really fast. So I did some recordings to help me remember what it was like. Hope you enjoy checking out those recordings and this video. This is just a short little clip. One of the reasons why I thought this video was important was that it slowed down. It's at 1/8 speed. There's volume to it. I turned that off for this video. It has this atmospheric quality that I couldn't capture in just a single photograph. And the slow motion really allows me to look at the light and see how it interacts with the translucent water and the wetness of the stones and how the light reflects. It's just amazing to me, just the power of nature and how the water moves. It's just so curious. If you want to watch the whole full-length video, there's about an hour of it, of just waves crashing in slow motion. And the sound, if you get a chance, the sound is pretty neat too. I'll add that link to the description below. I hope you get to check it out because it's pretty neat. I want to take a second to talk about setting up. Setting up your art space is pretty important. You want to have good lighting, adequate space, make sure that you have room for all of your goodies, that you're not going to accidentally knock something over or into something else, and something to protect the surfaces. Now my table, I usually use something like a piece of cardboard from the recycling bin, or if there's newspaper around, something to protect my table and my work area, that surface. Our actual art storage, is there enough room for the things that I'm going to need? If I stand up, am I going to knock something over? And then when our art is finished, that kind of art storage also, not just the supplies, but the art storage of when I'm done painting, where are my paintings going to go? Can I hang them up somewhere to dry? Can I lay them flat to dry? Is it a space that's a common area that art is going to get moved or touched when people walk by? So making sure that you're in a good space to do art is something to think about for sure. The last thing is cleaning up. Make sure that you have some paper towel or some sort of rag to clean up in case you make a mess. Be aware of your workspace and also yourself and what you've got going on. I'm going to show you exactly how I set up my workspace. I'm sure this is kind of a funny view, but you're looking down. My background is also my desk. I've got my brushes I'm going to put over here. I've got my paints. Right now I've got my acrylic paints, but I've got some more in case I change my mind. I also have some watercolors. When I'm painting, sometimes I'm not sure where things are going to go, and I like to get everything out, because I'll probably use a little bit of everything. I might even use markers before this is all over with. Right here I have some cardstock. This is the tag board. This is tag board from our recycling bin. I've just scavenged it. I have two pieces of tag board here actually. The bottom one is there to protect my table. Instead of newspaper, I'm using this. I have my little index card sized pre-cut tag board pieces that were also scavenged from our recycling bin. I've got some water in my recycled, upcycled salsa jar. I have my paint palette. Now this one is a lid for sour cream. I'm going to be using acrylic paint today. I've used this palette a couple of times. It's nothing fancy. If you're using acrylic paint, you can either rinse it while it's still wet, or after it's dry. Sometimes, if you're lucky, once there's enough on there, you can peel it back and have a nice clean palette underneath. I like to have a couple in rotation, so as one is drying, we've got another that's ready to use. Paint, palette, water. my brushes. I also have a ruler and a number 2 pencil, just a simple school pencil. I'm going to be making a few marks on my paper. I'm not going to sketch out the whole thing, but I like to get an idea of where things are going to be placed before I start painting. Maybe my absolute favorite item, necessity item, masking tape. I have masking tape in all different colors. This one just happens to be blue. This painter's tape will help me to secure the paper on my work area, but it also serves as a border for when I'm painting. After I remove the tape, I'll have a really nice, crisp, clean line, a nice frame around the border. And also this will help secure it as it dries. While the paint is drying, sometimes if I use too much water, it tends to curl up on the corners. If I secure it with tape and let it dry, it doesn't seem to curl as much. Now, I'm notorious for using way too much water when I'm using acrylics. When I learned to use acrylics, I used them as most people would use watercolor. So watercolor has more of a translucent property to it, and you can almost see through it and it just flows. The acrylic is a little more thick, and there's no reason why I can't use these together in the same piece. It's just I need to be thoughtful about which one I'm going to use and how. I might even go back at the very end and use markers, or do everything in watercolor and then go back and highlight with only acrylic. It really depends on personal preference. There's so many things that are so open-ended in art that there's no real right or wrong way to do it. It's what feels right to you. So low stress, we're going to take it easy. I pulled this up real quick so that you could see a list of what I will be using today. And I might use these things in different ways than you might expect. Everything that I use will be in the description below. And this is kind of like the main list. If you have something different at your house, if you decide to use watercolors instead of the acrylics that I do, that's awesome. That's wonderful. I hope these videos inspire you to create and not necessarily copy what I'm doing exactly. It's up to you, and it's supposed to be fun and relaxing and super low stress. This is a small pre-cut sheet of tag board. My favorite, masking tape, number 2 pencil, acrylic paint, a watercolor, or maybe a tempera paint. Those will also work. I am using water as my solvent. It's not on the list, but I will be using a paintbrush, not my hands or fingers, or a Q-tip. I might get paint on my hands, but it's not going to be intentional today. Well, I'm a teacher and maybe I can't help myself, but I needed to talk a little bit about art vocabulary for just a second, and I just want you to know what I am talking about when I'm using these terms. The first one is landscape. Not only are we going to be painting a landscape like what's behind me, but also we're going to have our paper in what I call landscape mode. So it's long across the bottom, short on the side. So this is my landscape. If it's this way, it's a portrait mode. So that's like if we wanted to paint a face or a portrait, we would typically, not always, but typically use our paper in a portrait mode. Today, since we're doing landscape, we're going to make sure our paper is long on the bottom and short on the sides. That is our landscape. Horizon line. Our horizon line runs all the way across from right to left or left to right, all the way across, and it goes right off the paper. Look at that, right off the paper. It is the dividing line between the sky and, well, in this case it's water, but between the sky and the earth, or the sky and the foreground, depending on what you're drawing or painting. But it's a dividing line to give it depth. And when we talk about depth, we also usually talk about value. So depth is a term describing how much atmospheric space is between an object or two objects, or as you're drawing and painting, what it feels like. You're giving this illusion the whole time you're creating art on a two-dimensional plane, that it's in the three dimension, that it's in this physical world. And you're using value with our lightest lights and our darkest darks to give this sense of depth, and they work together to give illusions. It's tricking the eye to think that I can reach out and put my hand into that painting if it's very realistic. But it gives a weight to your objects, and it works together to make it more realistic. There's different ways to add depth. You can make something in the background teeny tiny in the background. There's like way back there. You can see here that those are trees. They're so tiny and they're so far away that they don't even look like anything. And then here, really close in the foreground, you can see that this rock is really close to me. And in real life, that rock is maybe the size of a baseball. Maybe it would fit in my hand. But it's so close, it's up, it's big because it's in the front. And that helps also give the illusion of depth within a painting. That depth can apply in many different ways. And the last one I want to talk about is artistic style. This one down here at the bottom. The reason why I included this was because we all have our own different way of doing things. Now, this photograph behind me, I know that if I tried to paint that, it is not going to look exactly like that photograph. And going into it, knowing that, I could definitely practice and practice until someday I could paint a hyper-realistic painting. But that's not today. And I would stress out a whole bunch if I was trying to do that. I think it's important to realize that you have a style and I have a style, and we can practice in the style of other artists. But to think that we are copy machines, that's what makes people frustrated. That's when you start getting angry about your art and frustrated if you're trying to copy somebody exactly. It takes a lot to create your own style, but it takes even more to copy someone exactly. And that's not what we really want to do. Art is about expressing ourselves and not being copy machine robots. We've got scanners for all that. So this is my little segment about art history and art styles to know. Now, if you paint a picture and I paint a picture, we're going to have our own styles. Claude Monet was an impressionist who created art that was landscape art, but also paid more attention to the actual light and the feel of that moment in time and space. And if you look close, there's teeny tiny little brush strokes and it goes really fast almost, and there's a lot of energy to it, and the attention is less to detail of a tree looking like a tree or a wave looking like a wave, but to capture that essence. And it has this feeling, this oomph, this energy of light and air about it. And he wasn't concerned with the fine details as much as some other painters, and that's just that style. Realists, on the other hand, like Winslow Homer, who was a painter that decided that the details were important. There is light and there is shadow, but if you look closely at his waves and his landscape paintings, you can see the definite detail. For some more contemporary artists, hyperrealism. An example of hyperrealism is artist Ukonu. He drew this picture using only ink pens. You know, those blue ink pens? Yeah, it's hyper realistic. It looks like a photograph. It's not. It's amazing. And I'm going to send just a link in the description for this one also. You really need to check it out. His work is amazing. You probably know all about cartoons and illustrations. Lale Westvind. And the second is Taylor K. Shaw, and she has the BWA studio. Both of them are artists that you need to check out. I won't go too much into detail with the cartoons. You probably know about cartoons. Taylor K. Shaw and the BWA studio. This is one of their animations, and I love this style. I think it's great and vibrant and wonderful. They've got a lot of things going on. Now, if I drew something is not going to look like that. And that's part of the reason why I mention styles in art history. If we all do a landscape together, even though we're doing it together, it's going to look different because we each have our own style. We're going to move on to actually making our own art. Today, I think that this color choice is going to be pretty general. I definitely need some yellows and golds, some blues. I'm going to take a couple blues. There's a lot of blue going on in here, but I definitely want some more of these oranges and yellows, bright king's gold, cardinal crimson. I don't have black, but I have this really nice pavement color, some white. There's not a lot of white in the picture itself, but there's some reflective surfaces, and I'm going to use this to tint my colors to get it just the right shade. Those values, those different values are gonna pop out when I use my darks and my lights, and I add them to my colors to get those different tones. And I'm not going to do this exact. I'm going to use this for a frame of reference, and I'm not going to stress out about it because it's going to be my own style. I'm going to switch. So this background's going to change to what's in front of me so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to set these aside and get my tape on my pieces that I do want to paint on. So tape, and we're going to do all the way around and try and keep it even all the way through. This is where I'm going to draw my horizon line. I'm going to start here and end here all the way across, and I'm using a ruler because I want my horizon to be straight. I don't want my water to look like it's a waterfall going off of the paper. I can estimate about 2/3, 1/3, and there's my horizon line. There's my original photo. And my horizon line goes left to right all the way across the paper, but also I have this little land area here, and there's like this little island that kind of goes about here, and it's not super straight. It looks like more of a mountain. I like mountains. There we go. But there's my landform way out in the distance, teeny tiny, teeny tiny. And I typically don't use an eraser because I don't want to run the surface by rubbing it with an eraser, and it gets just kind of a weird texture that way. I know that I have some rocks here in front, and I'm going to just kind of rough them in a little bit. Just to remind me they're there. My painting isn't going to be exact, and I know that. I'm okay with it. My first color, I'm going to start with my lighter colors here. I'm going to put in this golden color, but I want a wider brush so that I can have a nice wash on this part here. I think this is probably my best brush for it. Now I have some larger brushes, some wider ones, and some that are angled, and some that are fanned. But I'm going to choose this brush, and I've got my water. There's my water there. Now my water, I think that one of the tricks for watercolor is to use the water to pull your color along. Now right now I'm only wanting to do my sky, so I'm going to get that just wet, just a little bit, and I'm going to follow that curve. And I don't know if you guys can see at home, but I'm just adding a little bit of water to my sky. I'm going to just work on my sky, filling it in. There, so you can see a little reflection. I don't want to put too much water on it because I don't want it to warp the paper or eat through it when I have brush strokes. I'm just gonna have my rag instead of a paper towel. I'm gonna dry my brush off, and I'm gonna start with that nice golden edge there. And I think I can start with this one here, and I'm gonna take a little corner of red, just a little bit, and it's gonna stay right in this area here. So my red, just a little bit of red right in that area there. And load my brush again, just a little bit more. And start pushing that around. Pushing and pulling, some blending action going on. Just a touch of water. My paper's a little bit dry there. And pulling it through. I'm going to pull all the way through. Just a little bit of water. I've got those base tones here. Now in this picture, this in my photo, I don't have a lot of that down here at the bottom. It's so dark, there's hardly any of that going on. So these are just real rough edges here, and I'm going to go back in, maybe take a little bit more of this and warm it up. It's a little bit cooler than I like. A little bit here. Back and forth. Just warming it up. And I don't want to overwork this paper too much. It's not... watercolor paper has the advantage of having a coating on it, and this doesn't have that coating. This coating is not meant for painting, but it works, it's sufficient. Now I've got some of that blue from the top, and this isn't my deepest, darkest blue, so I'm going to take a little bit of this blue, just a tiny bit, and I'm debating whether or not to add a little bit of white. So I'm going to go right on this edge here with my blue. That's my darkest point for the sky. And pulling it through. Just a touch of water. I think I will add a little bit of, I can move this over. I think I will add a little touch of white to it and give it that creaminess. And I don't want to overpower it. If I start muddying these up and getting those colors too white or too gray, it makes it look really flat, and I just don't want that. But I'm gonna go like right in this middle zone here and start drawing out this space with a little bit of white. I don't want to add more water, but I want to add more that color and that creaminess to that sky. And with one corner, I'm just going to touch on this blue and pull it through. I'm going to do that a couple times. I liked that. That felt right. Oops. Sit down. it's funny to paint and to look at the monitor and to look at the brush. It's a little bit disorienting sometimes. There we go. There we go. That's what I'm talking about. I'm liking that. And I'm not pressing hard on my brush. I'm pulling it back. So if you can get a better visual, it's back and forth. I'm making me like little X's. And it's hard to see from this angle for you guys, I'm sure. A little more blue up here. And just very gently touching that paper. Just the tips of my brush. I don't want to overwork it, so I think that's about it. A little more white, and blend that in with our yellows and golds. Soften that up just a touch more. You can go back and add a little bit of this warmer yellow. And I've got my corners, it's flipped. So there's my orange, yellow, that golden, and then the white there. I'm going to start mixing and pulling and mixing and pulling. It's a very undefined line, and for mine, I feel like I just have too much of a line. I'm just going to pull some color through. I don't know if it translates at all, but I'm still rotating the brush in my hand as I'm making the brush strokes. Just really blending it. A little more of this gold and through here. And as I'm adding more, I'm going to be thinking about adding more of those details. Really want to make it pink. I want it to keep it that orangey orange, so it's got the two-tone again with the red and the yellow, gold, and using my brush to get it on in there, just a little bit more of that orangey, creamy color. Careful not to add too much. Oh, I might have done too much. Ha! No, that's not bad. That's not bad. Pulling it through. And I've kind of got this arc, this shape of where the sun is setting in the lowest point there. And I'm working it through. I'm pulling these lines. Okay. I'm going to let that dry. We've got our clouds, but I don't want to blend the colors of our cloud with the sky. I might do something a little different with that. I'm definitely not going to do that splash of water for this one. I think that's too complicated, too complex. I'm just going to do these real basic water lines. So the next that water is not completely blue or black or gray. And it is, a lot of times you have these reflections of the surface, on the surface of the water from the sky, and I don't see as much of that in this. So I'm going to rinse my brush here so it doesn't dry out. And switch just a little bit. And I'll come back for those reflections. I'm just drying my brush here. Now, switching to this brush here for my landforms. And I'm going to use not my darkest, my pavement, but I'm going to use this nice admiral blue. It's real dark blue here. See how that handles. So I'm just going to buff in shapes here. And there's not a lot of detail because it's so far away. I'm not adding water at this point. I don't really want my paint to get too watered down. That's definitely a concern with the acrylics versus the watercolors and other paints, temperas, is how they hold water and what happens to them when you add water. Just roughing these in. Not a lot of overlap. Get these filled in so that I don't leave any white space between where my landforms are and my sky. And I'm not blending any colors with this yet. I want this to be nice and solid before I go any further. I'm just going to take this and push paint up just a little bit there to cover. There's just a little bit of white peeking through. I'm not into that right now. Really dark, mysterious painting. That dusky, almost gone sunlight. Following my horizon line. Now the next part, I still have all this water here, and my water has a nice grayish, bluish quality to it. And I think that this might be, let's test a little bit. I'm going to test up here. That might be a little bit too bright for me versus this. So I've got this admiral blue versus this brighter blue that is, what is this blue? Cobalt blue. It is a nice true cobalt. And I think that I actually want to do a little bit, just a touch of this cobalt with the pavement first, and then let that dry, and then go back and add a little bit of the pavement. Now, I'm not going to do, the blue with the white. Now, I'm not going to mix it all together at once because I don't want it to be gray. There's not a lot of gray in this picture, but there's a lot of blues and different tints to it and shades. So those different values, we are going to go from our middle value being this true admiral blue right out of the bottle. And then I'm going to mix it with some of this pavement. There's a pavement there. I don't know if you guys can see the different tones. And I'm just kind of scoop it with my brush and see if I like, oh yeah, that's a nice, it has some gray but not too much. So I definitely want a distinction between my landform, this back here, and my water, but I don't want it to be shockingly different either. So I'm going to fill this in, and I'm going to go right from the horizon line to the shore, the bottom, the foreground of this picture with this blend of pavement and my admiral blue. I'm not adding any water right now as I'm painting my water, because I do not want this to be transparent in any way, and it's already pretty moist. If I had a spray bottle, I might want to spray it or spritz it, but it's such a small piece that I think I'll be okay. I'm scooping here and then color matching up here as best as I can. I want this to be a nice solid color. And pulling it through, kitty lick, as we say. Make sure that these brushes stay nice. I'm pulling, not pushing. And this one I'm not using the tip like the other brush. It's just a different brush and a different way of using it. Fill in this area here. Just a little more of that. Now, I feel like in my photo that as we're getting closer to the front of the photo, that we also have a little bit more blue than gray, that it shifts a little bit more. And I'm going to go back with my white to highlight this, but I feel like there's a shift from this grayish dark blue back here to a more pronounced blue that is not really lighter as much as it is differenter. Is that a word? That's not a word. There's just a different value to it that's closer to you, and an intensity that's just a little bit different. So as I'm getting closer, I'm remembering those rocks in the forefront, but I'm also adding more blue than pavement as I'm working through. And that'll also help with contrast. I need just a little bit more of this here. So there's my admiral blue, and just a touch more. And I've roughed in where those rocks are, and I'm not gonna fuss too much about the rocks, but they're about there, and lightly fading it, blending it as much as I can. I'm working pretty quickly. I don't know if you can see how quickly this is drying, but it's fast. And if I were working on canvas, I would have used maybe gesso on my canvas and sealed it so it didn't quite dry quite as quickly as this is doing right now. Go back and take my blue, and there's a couple spots that I'm going to fill in. This is that straight admiral blue on my landform back here. I think this is distracting me. There we go. I'm feeling better about that. So here in the front, I'm going to take my admiral blue and I'm going to fill in some of these rocks, these forms. And you know, I like this brush. I was going to switch, but it feels really good to have this square brush for these rocks and these waves here. So there is my first. I'm going to rough that one in. And I don't think you guys can see it as well as I can. There's another one. They're roughed in just because of the lighting in my studio space, not necessarily the lighting of the picture, though that does seem to play into it a little bit. I really wish I had black for this, but I don't, and that's okay. I'm filling it in, and I'm definitely taking some artistic liberty here with these forms, and I know it. I know they're rocks. They're happy little rocks. And I've gone right to the edge of the paint because I know that when I take this off, I'm going to have a nice, clean, crisp line right there. So now, I've got a couple spots of the wet paint, but I'm going to rinse my brush, and I'm going to start thinking about lightening that water up. I don't want to necessarily add the water to the paint, and I don't necessarily want to add the white paint to the water. So I'm going to clean my brush really well, and I'm going to switch. I'm going to switch to a finer brush, and I'm not mixing. I'm just going to highlight with this one. Now with the waves, as I'm washing my brush, you can see that horizon line again in the distance. And in the distance, see right there? I'm going through that horizon line. I'm going to use that line again, and I'm going to do kind of a dry brush. And from here to here, if you look at our photo, there's our photo, there's our photo. If you look at our photo, you can see that there's more white or light blue in those places. And that illusion, it has to do with the depth. So as I'm getting closer to me in space, my waves are going to be closer together. So back here, my waves are going to be closer together, and as I move closer, that illusion of the wave, they're going to get bigger and more spread apart the closer I get, until there's hardly any at all. So way back here, it's almost a line of that white, so right here. But then as we're getting closer, maybe there's more here, but here there's hardly any with the space between, and it appears to be a different color, but it's just that additional layers of white working its way through. So this part, I'm gonna let this dry just a little bit. I've got some wet paint here, but I think I'm gonna go in and start doing some clouds. So those clouds are gnarly, huh? Those are just wild, and they're not really, I think I'm gonna use my fan brush, maybe? Here's my fan brush. They don't really go one way or another. They seem to radiate out and this way and this way. So I'm gonna see about making maybe a little bit of gray. Right here. And I'm gonna practice up here and see if it's Ooh. Ooh, I like it. Let's see if we can get a little more even. Yeah. So we've got that fan brush, and I dipped a little bit in this corner and this corner and this corner, this corner, and I'm gonna mix. Oh, I'm so nervous. I'm so nervous. Okay, so I've got a little over here. And then I've got a little over here, and maybe a little bit more of that gray. There we go. Oh yeah, I like it. And some gray here. Yeah. Some feathery things going on throughout the sky, and I've got this swoosh here, swoosh there. I'm gonna blend it just a little bit more. There we go. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So I've got like this weird swoosh here, and then I've got these swooshes going this way. It's a very dry brush. It kind of skips across the paper there. Yeah, I like it. And if you want to soften it up once you get, you can just touch just a little tap, that little touch of water in there. Soften it up. Oh, that's a little too much. I'm just barely touching all those clouds there. Now, I'm going to rinse that brush. And it's not as soft as I want it to be. I know I just dry brushed it. I know I just did that. But before that dries, let's see if I can do it. It might be too dry already. I'm going to take the sponge. And I'm just going to make sure that it's sitting flat. And see if I can spread. Ooh, it's wet. Spread some of that around without really reworking that space too much. So I've got my crazy clouds in there. Some crazy clouds. Trying not to work it too much. Go back in and hit a little bit more. And now I've got a really wet brush that's barely got any paint on it, and I am going to soften those just a teeny little bit, just the tiniest. There we go. I don't like to see those brush strokes, especially right here. That bothers me. A little too dry. Some crazy clouds going in the back. Some crazy clouds going over here. Okay. If I do any more, I think I'm going to run it though. Maybe just a little. Oh, no. Got this one spot. It's calling to me. It says, paint me right here. I don't really, not really happy with that right there. And I've got my I feel better about that. It's so dark and stormy looking now, though. Soften those up. Make sound effects. Yes, I feel good about that. I feel good about it. If I go too much, I'm gonna ruin that sky and be upset. So I'm washing my brush here again and drying it here. Dry. I'm gonna go back in and brush it next. Flipping through. I'm not sure which one I want to use here. want to draw some lines, but I don't really want them to be very precise. I want the brush to do the work, not me. I think I'm gonna do this one. We'll try it. And this one, I'm not gonna do the straight up white. I'm gonna blend some with this blue. I don't want it that stark white. I did add a little bit of water. My stuff's getting a little bit dry. There we go. Okay, so I'm going back on that. I'm bracing myself here. See if I can do it. Bracing and going across the horizon. Barely touching the paper there. Just barely. Pulling it through. There we go. I like that. And again, pretty dry brush for this one. These waves are pretty close because they're so far away. So we're adding almost lines to it. Way out there. Okay, I'm gonna stick that darker blue and start filling it in. I'm going. And as I'm getting closer to the shoreline, oops, sorry, I bumped the table there, I'm going to start spacing those out quite a bit more. And going back in. And I'm going to straighten this horizon line out again, because it really does look like I have some massive waves in the back, and I'm just not into that. So I'm going to take a second brush, and this one is dry. I'm just gonna go straight for that blue. We did those mountain, or that Landform blue, and I'm just gonna tidy up this edge here. My horizon line a little more tidy. Straighten it out. Now it's reflecting really weird right there in that one spot. It's because the paint is wet. See if I can spread it out there. There we go. And rinse that brush and move back to gouache. Moving back to my more detailed brush, and I'm going to start adding some highlights here. We've got some choppy water. There's definitely some light and dark at play here. And we've got some shadows. A little bit of light splashing up in these waves here. And this is, I'm going to stick with a nice blue because I have these rocks all around. And just the tops of these closer waves that are hitting. I'm trying to focus more on just splashes coming up and over. But it's not right out, so we don't want to highlight this. So there's not much for the water that has the light shining through it. So we don't want to do too much as far as the highlights on. Oop, and just said I don't want to do too much. I'll blend it in there. So there's all this atmospheric light, and we've definitely got some light shining here and there, and then also on these rocks here. And it's a really dynamic light, so I'm just gonna blend and add just a touch, these brights here. Got a little bit too much there. There we go. Going in and just touching it up just a little bit. Some wave action. It's not quite as dramatic as the photo, but that's okay. It's not supposed to be as realistic. I'm roughing it in and I know it. And that's all right. Now I definitely have some light and dark on my rocks here, and it's hard to say. The light isn't really coming from one way or another. It's just kind of a glow. So I'm going to add a little bit of white to my pavement gray and start highlighting. Like the top of this rock, I can see it's here, and the top of the one is over here. And it's just hitting, it's coming this way, but there's also so much reflection. There's lights from all over in this. So I'm gonna start over here on this side and using some angular, a little more. I'm trying to be very angular in these strokes. Rocks are not always smooth and have those very abrupt edges to them, even at the beach. And feeding into the others. We've got this to blend and very, very gently fade into other bits. And pulling it through, and with the light just kissing these edges here, the touch, that brightness to say, here I am. I'm a little bit different here than the rest of this water. I'm something new. I'm a new form. But it's also reflecting. So we have that reflection pulling through of the light. You can almost end up seeing how there's that golden from the sunset on the rocks themselves. We've got some more over here. And just touch that white and gray blended in with them. There we go. Holding my brush very tight, and I shouldn't. There we go. Light just hitting those real gently around those edges, filling it out and through. Now I know that I'm going to pull this off and through here, so I'm not too worried about this below and making any details for that. I'm looking here to see if I want to add any more in between. I know there is some water in between some of these rocks down here, so maybe I'll add some there. That blue, filling it in, remembering to go around, and that's bringing me right to that edge with the there's no words here. With the water right there. Adding just a little bit of blue. I don't think you guys can see the difference between those two blues there. I'm gonna add a little bit more right in here. I just feel like it needs just a touch more. Those waves a little bit closer, just a little bit. And I can also take some away here. I think this is maybe a little bit, yes, a little bit too fat in those lines. I don't really want to blend the colors too much here because they're very defined, independent of each other. Using a very dry brush for all of that. And I think that's about it for me today. I feel pretty good about this in general, and it's dried pretty quickly. I'm impressed how quickly it dried even. Now I've got all these metallics here that I ended up not using. I'm really bummed. I wanted to definitely to use some metallic somewhere in my painting today. I was imagining that I would use it. Oh, it was all dry. Gross. Oh, there we go. I was imagining that I would use just touches of it to highlight, maybe I'll do it anyways, just to highlight right in these areas on this rock and reflecting that sky. Oh yeah, look, I'm doing it. You've got those goldens that are pulling through. Yeah, I'm gonna use that artistic license here to pull those through. And maybe just a little bit on the water here. I'm gonna start here and pull it this way. And very, very gently, just touching a little bit of that gold, sweeping it through. And I've got this other dry brush, so I don't have quite so much line. I don't really like the line look, because it's not straight and my water is, water is level. I'm going to be really careful not to make it out of level. Ooh, I like that. I feel good about that. Might even, like, am I going, is it overboard? Am I going overboard here? I don't know. I want a little bit of gold up here. Just want to use that gold up. I don't want to waste that paint. Just the teeniest little bits. Okay, before I run this, before I go too far, this brush has kind of seen its last day. It's got some stray hairs going. It's not helping my cause here. Let me try and balance that out. There we go. Oh, look, I said I wasn't going to use my fingers. I totally just used my fingers. And I think that's it. I feel good about this. I feel good about this painting, and I hope that you're able to be inspired by something in nature. Maybe you'll be inspired by my video, and I'd love for you guys to make your own and not copy mine exactly. This is a good base. This is a good start, and I hope you feel good about your paintings and keep practicing where you can. I'm gonna call it a day and continue on. Keep looking out for those videos, and I'm gonna keep posting links below in the description for those other sites I was talking about, and then also that slow-mo video. So that's it for today, and keep on creating. Bye.